But could it not be that science can open some gaps? Now, what I mean by that is this. Your assumption, as I understand it, is that there's going to be an exhaustive, reductionist, naturalistic explanation of everything in scientific terms. I don't think so. Now, if there is a God, and if he created this universe, and if he is personal, then I would expect certain things to follow. One, that I would see evidence, not proof, but evidence in the universe that God existed. Because the idea, ladies and gentlemen, that science can explain everything is seriously false. The Nobel Prize winner Peter Medawar said science cannot deal with the simplest questions of a child. Why am I here? What is the meaning of my life? It cannot deal with culture, with art, with poetry, with history. Science is limited, and that's no insult to science. The Bible gets very easily dismissed, I'm afraid, also in the God delusion. Penzias added, the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Now, what I find very interesting is this. The Bible is frequently dismissed as being anti-scientific because it makes no predictions. Oh no, that's incorrect. It makes a brilliant prediction. For centuries it's been saying there was a beginning. And if scientists had taken that a bit more seriously, they might have discovered evidence for the beginning a lot earlier than they did.
Up until the 1920s, everyone thought the universe was essentially static and unchanging in time. Then it was discovered that the universe was expanding.
The moment you see even a single letter of the alphabet, you know there's a mind behind it. Isn't it odd that we can see the 3.5 billion letters of the genetic alphabet in exactly the right order in the human genome and say chance and necessity?
The deist God would be one that I think it would be, one could make a reasonably respectable case for that, not a case that I would accept, but I think it is a serious discussion that we could have.
Now, so often we hear the new atheists talk about faith and deprecating it, but I want to tell you that scientists are all people of faith, as Einstein saw. They believe that the universe is accessible to the human mind. And physics cannot explain that for the simple reason that you can't do physics without believing that the universe is intelligible. Another evidence of the greatness of God consists in the ordinary freedoms that we often take for granted. Here's an influential German atheist thinker, Jürgen Habermas, and he says this: Christianity and nothing else is the ultimate foundation of liberty, conscience, human rights and democracy, the benchmarks of Western civilization. To this day we have no other option We continue to nourish ourselves from this source. Everything else is postmodern chatter. It was Christianity, not atheism, incidentally, that originally gave us the universities that educated the new atheists, gave them the liberty that permits them to propagate their views and the law that protects them, as well as the rest of us.
Is there a contradiction or an inconsistency between the biblical account of the age of the earth and your statement?
Well, that's interesting, because there isn't any biblical account of the age of the earth. There's nothing in the Genesis or elsewhere in the Bible that says how old the universe is.
Atheism, the statement that there is no God, is not a scientific statement. Let's unwrap that. Science is limited to making statements about nature, but science is committing a category error to claim dominion over the question of God. But yes, God is the author of our universe and of our planet and of you and me.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, what we are discovering is this: that there's a battle for our minds, and there are two worldviews. Which makes more sense of science and rationality? And you can possibly dimly perceive that I pin my faith on the one that starts in the beginning of the Word. Now, those early scientists didn't make the mistake of the new atheists and offer us the false alternative of either science or God. God is the agent who designed the whole universe which science attempts to describe.
What do you mean when you say you started thinking for yourself? When you were an atheist, you were not thinking for yourself?
I think I was buying into this sort of idea, look, science disproves God, religion leads to violence. And I think I just accepted that without thinking about it. It just seemed to make sense. But then when I went to university, I kind of said, look, I've got to think about this. And it suddenly became much more complicated, much more interesting too, but really complicated.
After all, science as we know it is the gift of the Judeo-Christian heritage to the world. Distinguished historian Edwin Judge of Macquarie University says, the biblical doctrine of creation is itself the creator of the methodology of modern science. We don't hold the Greeks' perspective anymore, in spite of the fact that people keep looking back to Greeks as the origin of science. It is not the origin of science. The book of creation is the origin of modern science.
It has to be admitted that, of course, science grew out of a religious tradition. As far as I'm aware, in no other field of science does this happen. Physicists don't have to fight a kind of rearguard action against sort of yapping terriers of ignorance the way biologists do.
I want to address the who designed the designer question, because it's the old schoolboy question, who created God. I am actually very surprised to find it as a central argument in your book, because it assumes that God is created. And I'm not surprised, therefore, that you call the book The God Delusion, because created gods are by definition a delusion. And if you say, if there is a God, you have to ask who created God, that means that you're reduced to thinking about created gods. Well, none of us believe in created gods. And I think that argument then is entirely beside the point, and perhaps you ought to put it on your shelf marked celestial teapots where it belongs. And that is that there is a God who is personal, who is good, who is the source of life and meaning, and who reaches out to me as a person, and who, in fact, far from stopping me doing science, encourages the development of the mind that he has given me.